What's going on, guys? This is House of Orange Sports Channel. Got Carrie, got Jordan with me tonight. I got a feeling we got plenty to talk about. I got a feeling we may get a little animated tonight. But, before we get into it, make sure you hit that like, that share, that subscribe. Tennessee loses tonight 75-64 to Kentucky. Just kind of started off here. It was a game I kind of felt as good as Kentucky was shooting. Tennessee kept hanging around, and then the end happened, and that was a pretty rough end to it. Carrie, what's your initial thoughts on it? And Jordan, I'll kick it to you because I know you've already said you got a lot of them tonight. I'm interested to hear both your thoughts here. Carrie, I'll start with you. What do you think on this one?
I'll try to keep it a little bit short because I don't really have anything nice to say currently. Just wasn't even close to good enough. I mean, that's a game that you should have won. I was a little bit confident going into the game thinking that we would at least probably walk out of Rep Arena tonight with a win. I think if Tennessee would have won tonight, it'd been like the fourth time in the past 5 years that they beat us in Knoxville and we beat them in Lexington. So I was kind of expecting that to happen again. That, of course, doesn't. It seems like Tennessee just forgot to show up on the offensive side of things and at times on the defensive side of things as well. There's just some guys on the team that are hit and miss, some big guys that you expect to score when you need them to, and they're just not doing that currently, especially in the bigger games. It's crazy how you can click the way you did in Norman, Oklahoma this past Saturday, and then get on a plane ride to Kentucky, and then it's just two completely different teams. So I don't really have anything good to say. I'm still pretty heated over it. I guess you got to move on considering it's just February 11th here, but overall, just not too happy with how the game went tonight.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a lot of happiness there, Jordan. I know you said you got a lot to say here. I'll kick it to you as well. What's your initial thoughts before we get real in depth into it? Your initial thoughts on it?
Yeah, my initial thoughts are just that's overcoaching 101. You just saw a masterclass in overcoaching is what you saw. They completely overcoached this team for the game tonight because they harped on the 45 threes in Knoxville and they shot at halftime. They had 9 mid-range jump shots. I mean, that's 1990s basketball. This is 2025. My initial takeaway is what you saw modern basketball, the way it's played with the team in white, and you saw 20 years ago basketball by the team played in orange. And I mean, that's what you get when one team shoots the way they do from three and they play confident and they shoot it confident, and then you got one team that can't throw it in the ocean and wants to do mid-range pull-ups instead of driving to the rim, and you're not playing the analytical game as you and I talked about Friday night. This is the result you get, and this is a game you should have won. So to me, it's overcoaching 101.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was, and we'll hit different aspects of it as well. I thought down the stretch, I mean, you need points, and of course, Ziegler's in, but your other guy who was hitting shots is sitting over here on the bench for a point in time. I mean, I don't know, man. I agree with you. I think it was some real interesting decisions tonight. Hit a couple comments there. GL, member of the channel, says good old corrupt arena. I thought there were some rough calls both ways. I'll be honest. Apparently, I don't know what the hell a travel is anymore because I'm pretty. I know Igor got away with one early. He got called for one too, but I watched the team in blue walk. They were pretty. I don't know how many times on that one, and then I'm gonna hit some of the member comments. Or JL says didn't hit the big shots when it counted. Otherwise, weren't walking out there with the win with the way that was called. Papa J said, I'm ready for an offensive-minded team. This is probably about as offensive-minded as it's going to get right now because I don't know what's going to happen next year. But to me, I'm kind of hit the stats here for me tonight. I mean, Chaz goes 10 points, 3 out of 13, 0 out of 7 for 3-point. That's not going to get it done. 6 rebounds for him. Ziegler, I thought Ziegler played. I mean, he's got to fix the turnovers. 4 turnovers to me is a little more than I like, but 17 points. I thought he was really playing good. And to me, I mean, it seemed like every time the dude drove down the lane, he's getting annihilated. It seemed, I don't know how many times with no calls. And I don't have a problem with a rough game, but, you know, I think you got to draw the line at a point too. Milicic, I mean, I thought he played a heck of a game, 16 points, 9 boards. Meshack, 0 points. He brings nothing offensively, 0 out of 1, 3 boards. Akpara, 8 points, 4 boards. Dubar, 4 minutes tonight. He was pretty rough. He missed a dunk. I mean, that was – he should have tried to lay that up because that was off. Gainey, 8 points. Gainey, I thought, had a rough night shooting. And Cade Phillips in 12 minutes, 5 points, 3 boards on the night. Jordan, I'll kick it back to you. You talked about coaching malpractice 101 on this. What else stood out to you tonight as differences in the game? Obviously, the shooting. Was there anything else on that did too?
Yeah, Igor gets hot in the second half and cuts the lead. I think it was to 1, and then he sits for what 4.5 minute stretch.
Way too long.
I mean, I don't know what you're doing. He didn't have any fouls. He wasn't in foul trouble. There's been plenty of games this year. You saw in the Missouri game where he's played the majority of the second half. So I don't want to hear the staff say he needed a rest. He's played plenty of times in the second half throughout the season. So I don't understand why you're putting him on the bench when he was the one making shots for you. He was the one attacking the rim and making things happen on the offense, and you just put his butt on the bench. I don't understand that. And then the lineup that you and I talked about on Friday night, Frank, I mean, in the first half it saw 3 minutes. It was +4. And then you didn't see it again until you were already down 3 with under 4 minutes to go in the game, and then you throw it in there as a Hail Mary. And as you and I talked about, and I'll use the phrase that I said, you do the break the glass in case of emergency. And he tried to do it again, and this time I didn't bail him out. He's refusing to play his best core together, and I don't understand it. That goes back to the coaching malpractice thing. I just looked it up. Overall in the game, you took 12 mid-range jump shots. I mean, you were 13 to 17 at the rim, and you're selling for mid-range jump shots. I don't understand it.
Yeah, and the fact that Milicic had 27 minutes tonight, that's too much. Carrie, what stood out to you? I mean, obviously, we could say Kentucky's 3-point shooting, but was there anything that stood out to you that was a big difference in this game as well?
I mean, I would just harp on more on what Jordan was talking about with the mid-range shots. They look like they settled at times. It looks like they're doing all that floppy action with Gainey a lot, and they're getting Gainey a lot of mid-range shots, and it continues like they're going with it again and again and again, and they're settling way too much for mid-range shots, and I've noticed that over the past few games. And it's different than what we've seen Tennessee do in the past under Rick Barnes. It's just not something that we've been accustomed to, I feel like. Dalton Knecht did it at times, but that's, of course, Dalton Knecht. But I don't think we have a guy on the team this year that can consistently make those shots like we saw DK do last year. Overall, it was extremely disappointing to see Tennessee kind of at times run around like chickens with their head cut off and just play totally different basketball than what we're kind of accustomed to at times. And whenever Kentucky's throwing it up and it's going in and they're shooting 60% from the 3-point line in the first half and you're 0 for whatever, it just stinks. I mean, it's just one of those things. It seems like the past 3 times we played Kentucky, every shot that they throw up goes in. And Tennessee,
it's insane, man.
Yeah, Tennessee just can't catch a break, it seems like. And I guess it is what it is. In the grand scheme of things, we're still in a better position than them. Of course, we're still fighting for the 2 seed, and they're fighting for whatever seed they're fighting for. And, of course, they have the lingering injury issues that are going to continue to hurt them. The 2 best games they played this season is against us. You can make the argument of the Duke game early in the season. The only time they really showed up is against us. That's still the same Kentucky team that played like they did against Arkansas, which was one of the worst performances I've seen from any team this season. So I'm not too necessarily worried about Tennessee. I just think Kentucky has our number this year. I'd still go out and say that Tennessee makes it further in the NCAA tournament than Kentucky does.
Yeah, and I'll kick it to you, Jordan, because we're texting a little bit. What about this Kentucky team gives Tennessee so much trouble on both ends of the floor?
On the defensive end for us, it's just because they spread the floor out beyond the 3-point line. Our defense is so built on keeping everything in front of you and jumping gaps and helping in gaps and helping off your guy. and they drive and they kick, and they got so many shooters at the 3-point line that we're over helping into gaps, and you're leaving guys wide open for threes. I'd be curious to see again tonight, if the stats come out later, like how many uncontested 3-point shots they had tonight, because I'm sure it's probably pretty high. So that's the first thing on the defensive end, is just we overhelp so much. We switch a lot on the defensive end to keep everything in front of us. Because the thing with us defensively is we give up a lot of 3-point attempts, but we basically, teams don't shoot that well against us from 3-point range. But when you have a team like Kentucky that's just littered with shooters the way they are, and that's what they do, this is what happens when you overhelp on defense. Offensively, I mean, they pretty much had the same game plan, which was, Jay Bilas said it multiple times during the broadcast, they didn't guard us past the 3-point line. And they play the percentages. The percentages say we don't shoot it well enough from out there to be a threat, and he's playing the percent. Mark Pope even said it. I think it was maybe after South Carolina or after Ole Miss, where one of his reporters asked him about his defense and how bad they've been playing, and he's like, I'm an analytical guy, I'm a percentage guy, and the percentages say what we're doing is the right thing, but now I'm starting to second guess that. What he's talking about is, in our situation, letting us shoot those shots is the right percentages, because this percentages say we're not going to make them at a high enough clip to match what they're able to do. And you saw it now, back-to-back games against us. He hit the nail on the head. It's worked.
Yeah, 3-point shot in both games has been the difference. And Billis was hitting on this one a lot tonight too, because both you guys talked about the mid-range jumpers here. And Billis he harped on the pump fake a lot tonight. If anybody was playing a drinking game with Jay Billis and pump fake tonight, they're passed out on the floor right now somewhere or over the toilet. He mentioned it a lot tonight. And what's going on, Miles? Good seeing you here, man. I noticed this multiple times. Chaz, heck, he backed up a couple times and the ball's coming right off to him. It's like, yeah, he's got to follow that up, man. And I think Chaz is what he is at this point. I think people's expecting DK Jr., and he's not. Chaz is still a decent player, but he's in conference. He's inconsistent. He's been up and down. And I think he's a different guy at home versus on the road. I know Oklahoma was a different story, but like you guys say, this Kentucky team just seems to have their number on it. I wanted to look to see if there was really anything else stat-wise that stood out to me. Looking to split, Kentucky shot 50% from field goal. Tennessee's 43%. 50% 3-point, 17% for Tennessee. Both teams 79% from the free throw line. Turnovers were 9-8. Not a big difference. Tennessee won the rebounds 33-26. And honestly, you look at the shooting, those rebounds probably kept it closer. But, I don't know how many second chance opportunities Tennessee, they had 15 second chance points. Could have been a whole lot more because they had a couple of possessions where they got multiple chances on it. I'll be honest, there's really nothing else down through here on the stat column that stands out to me. It comes down to 3-pointers. That's the bottom line on it. And you mentioned wonder how many times they were left wide open. They hit some tough shots tonight too. Carrie, what do you do in that regard? Do you just freaking foul them? Tennessee's normally good for a foul or two a game from 3-point range.
I don't know what you do. The Bray kid, that's the 2 games that he's played against us. He's made some huge shots. So hats off to him. The shots he made in the last 4.5 minutes those were 2 amazing shots. Like, you can't really do anything about that, especially when you have Akpar guarding him, and his wingspan is what his wingspan is, and it's in his face, and he still drains it. So some shots you can't do anything about. I'd rather them make shots like that than make stupid fouls on those shots and then pull my hair out. Because I'm not going to pull my hair out the fact that he made a shot like that as much as I would if you foul him and you just take the guy out.
No, I think it is. On those, you just got to tip your cap. You just got to tip your cap and go on with it. According to the Rupp crowd, did Kentucky actually commit a foul tonight? I mean, it seemed like every time they did, their crowd went nuts about it.
I'll say real quick, the 3-point shot is the greatest equalizer in basketball. And, I mean, looking at it, we have more paint points than them. We have more rebounds than them. We had more steals than them. We have one more turnover than they had. I mean, your equalizer is the 3-point shooting. As you mentioned, they went 12 for 24 and you went 3 for 18. So, so you lost by 11. The free throws are pretty much equal. So the greatest equalizer is the 3-point shots, modern basketball. And, you're talking about like them hitting contested shots and stuff. I mean, that's just going out and getting guys that can create their own shot. How many guys on our roster one-on-one can create their own shot? There's nobody on the roster that can create their own shot. So, you have to be able to create your offense through your sets and through your screening action. Well, now teams have figured out that with Chaz, he can't handle physicality and he can't dribble a basketball. He's very soft dribbling a basketball. If you get up into him and you get physical with him and you knock him off whatever space he's occupying, he can't take that. He has to be able to use screens to get open. Well, then, as Barnes has been harping all year long, he doesn't know how to utilize screens to get open, because when he played at North Florida, he played in a system like what Kentucky has, where it's so spaced out, he has space to play one-on-one basketball. And the athletes in that conference aren't as good as the athletes in this conference. So now he's having to learn how to utilize a screen, how to manipulate a defender with leverage to come off a screen to get open. And as Barnes has mentioned plenty of times this year, the freedom of movement. There is no freedom of movement anymore. They're basically letting you grab, hold, get up into people. So if he's not coming off a screen wide open, he doesn't have the ability to create his own shot. And then as you've been seeing throughout the year, and you saw a couple of times tonight, when he gets around the rim, he's extremely soft. He can't finish around the rim. He doesn't have the athleticism to get off the floor and finish quick, and he's just too soft with the ball. He doesn't know how to use his body to shield the defender from the ball. And, I mean, how many times has he been blocked right at the rim this season? 4 or 5 times, on a dunk or a layup. So he's basically just a jump shooter, and he has to have a screen to be a jump shooter. Whereas you look on the other side of the floor and you look at Jackson Robinson and Kobe Bryant and those guys, and they can create something off the dribble, and they can create their own space for their shot. I mean, you saw what the Meshack there at the end with him guarding Brea. I mean, he created his own space, step back to shoot it, and we don't have anybody that can do that.
That's what I was going to ask. Do we have anybody that can do what Brea did at the end?
No.
I mean, to me, Brea at the end had the 2 step backs, and then they kind of overcorrected, and he drives down the lane, throws the oop up. I mean, that's 8 points in a couple minutes span, while we got Igor Milicic sitting over there on the bench for part of it. But, Carrie, is this one of those things you just like, wasn't our night? Kentucky outshot us, we move on? Or is this something you think will come back again later on down the line?
I don't think this is one being at this point in the season and against especially that team where you can just totally flush it and forget about it, just because of the historic matchups that we have against them and what they mean to us whenever you talk about this game. And especially you could get over the one in Knoxville. It was kind of happened. Tennessee shot historically awful from the 3-point line, and you could flush it and move on from it. Now they swept you. They've whipped you 2 times. You can't necessarily just flush tonight 2 and move on. That's what you want to do. That's what you're going to try to do. I just don't like that. I think that this is something that you have to continue to harp on tonight's game, because there was a lot of things that went wrong. Tennessee kind of let Kentucky do whatever they want at times tonight, man. That was the same thing they did in Knoxville, in all honesty. But overall, you do still have to move on, unfortunately. I mean, Vanderbilt's coming in. I get they got whooped tonight by Auburn. Nice to see Auburn bounce back like that. I wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting some Memorial magic again to happen tonight. But you got to beat Vanderbilt on Saturday and then move on from there. Tennessee, luckily, doesn't have the hardest schedule of the last few games. They got a lot more winnable games than some other teams in the conference. So overall, you just got to move on. I mean, it sucks. I mean, it sucks for the fan base. It sucks for the fan base. It's hard to move on. I don't know about the team how easy it is. I know it sucks for them too, but it's just, I guess you got to put your head on and move forward. I mean, it's still February. It sucks it happening this late in the season almost, that this is the fourth time or whatever it's happened this season where it's like Tennessee just doesn't show up and you get beat. But then again, that's kind of Rick Barnes basketball. You're not going to go 5 straight games and shoot lights out and be confident in how Tennessee played. And that's the scary thing about March. That's been the same feeling I've had for every year that Tennessee's made the tournament of, you want to play a good game, you're going to play a decent game, then it's going to happen. Tonight's going to happen. What they did to us in Knoxville is going to happen. You come out and you just can't shoot the ball. And unfortunately, that will probably end up happening in the NCAA tournament, considering it's happened almost every year. Hopefully it doesn't, but unfortunately it's going in the path of it's going to happen again.
Do you think, Jordan, I know, I've talked about it, and you're a diehard basketball guy, keep up with it very thoroughly, a lot more thoroughly than I do, because I'll keep up Tennessee, but kind of watch it here and there. Let's say we don't see Kentucky again, but this type Kentucky team, because I think a lot of Kentucky that caused trouble too was their ability to kind of get a little bit of a drive going, and then guys are kind of collapsing on it and leaving dudes open. But are there any other teams out there that we could possibly see come tournament time who play similar to Kentucky that could cause Tennessee a lot of trouble?
Yeah. I mean, what you're seeing right now is, so, they talk about in football how you'll see stuff in the NFL and it will trickle down to the college game. What you're seeing right now in across college basketball is the NBA style trickling down to the college game. It started out at the lower levels and the mid-major levels, and now it's starting to trickle its way up. And more teams are going to this 3-point barrage, high tempo, transition, a lot of possessions, free-flowing basketball. And as you go look at like offensive ratings over the last handful of years, they've skyrocketed. 3-point attempts have went up. 3-point shooting has went up. Shooting percentages have went up. The game is slowly evolving into what the NBA is. And way more teams play this style than there were 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 6 years ago. And, it's what my concern has been with Rick Barnes for years now, really ever since the last Grant and Admiral team, that we never have enough offense. And, I don't want to turn this into like an overall program view, show or anything, but just some quick thoughts on just the overview of the rest of the season, the program itself, and the NCAA tournament. It goes to what Carrie said. Like, this is a showcase of what I just think is going to end up happening in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. You're just going to run into a team that can't miss, and you don't have enough offense to keep pace. And this has just been my biggest, I don't want to say pet peeve or concern with Coach Barnes for 4 to 5 years now, is he's so hell-bent on this defense that he gives up so much on the offensive end. And you look at winning 5 straight or 6 straight to get to a Final Four or to a national championship game, there will be a game you're going to run into a team that cannot miss. They just can't. No matter how good of a defense you play, like tonight, they can't miss. Can you keep pace on the offensive end? And the answer for us, outside of having Dalton Knecht, is we can't. Dalton Knecht was a generational player, and he elevated the program, the roster, the offense beyond what it was the previous years, last season. He's the reason you made it to the Elite Eight. He's the reason you won the SEC regular season championship. And you don't have a Dalton Knecht on this team. And you don't have enough offensive-oriented players or shooters or guys that can create their own shot to generate offense. And the problem, too, is the offense has evolved to where with the Grant Admiral teams, when you had Grant and you had Kyle Alexander and you ran the motion offense, you dumped it into the post. That was the very first thing you would do, inside-out basketball. And you would get it to Grant, and that's how you wanted to play. He kept trying to play that for a couple of years, but he never found another Grant. He never found another Kyle Alexander. He didn't have anybody to dump the ball into. All he had was guards, Keon, Jaden, those type of guys, and the offense sputtered along. And then he started morphing into a little bit more touching into the modern offense a little bit more, but then he didn't recruit enough shooters. So then the offense still was stagnant because you didn't have enough shooters. And then here comes DK, comes along, and he elevates it higher than what it had been. And now he's gone, and you're going right back into what you were the previous years before he was here. It's just an offensive scheme. It's a culture that he's built that he wants to have, and it's really, really good over a 30-game season. Like over 30 games, that defense is going to show up enough that it's going to win you 20, 22, 25 games a year. You're going to make the NCAA tournament. You have a really high floor with Rick Barnes and with this system. But to be able to break through the ceiling and raise the ceiling to get higher, you're going to have to find a generational talent like a DK to raise this, and you don't have enough right now. And your offensive scheme and your offensive players aren't good enough to drag you to where you need to go.
Yeah, I think that, looking at it too, and I was kind of laughing at a buddy of mine. I'll give the clean version of this one. Tell me I think he said tonight. Tell me what this blinking defense has gotten us in the last 5 years. In the Elite Eight with the generational basketball talent. Woo, blinking who? He said Fire Barnes do something different. And then ends up. I don't know, man. I guess my thing, I can't sit here and say I'm not on the Fire Barnes. People get on that now because to me, you have to be careful what you wish for. We've seen it. You end up with somebody like a Conzo Martin or something out there, and you'll be wishing a little bit differently on it. But, yeah, like you said, man, I mean, you talked about that team with Admiral, with Schofield. You had Kyle Alexander. You also had Bone, who was pretty good, could knock down a shot. Jordan Bowden could knock down a shot.
Lamonte
Turner. I mean, and that was, you think about that team, Fulkerson and E. Pons would come in and kind of relieve for a few minutes, but not huge factors. But that's a pretty strong top six. And, all those guys could hit their shots. And ever since that, though, I mean, he's gone more athletes and defense. This ain't going to get it done, man. I want Barnes to get a championship as much as he has. I mean, especially since it's Tennessee. But what the hell's going to happen next year when you lose everybody? And you got nothing coming back offensively.
And another complaint that I have is if we're going to do this whole defense thing, like look at the difference between Houston's roster and what Calvin Sampson does at Houston, and he's all about defense, and look at our roster. Houston's bigger, stronger, more athletic. They have longer wingspans. They're athletic freaks. They can't play offense that great, but they will play defense like crazy, and they're athletic across the board. You look at us, I mean, our two most athletic guys is a 5'9" point guard that has limitations because of his height, and then Felix Parr, which is really good. Outside of that, I mean, nobody's calling Gainey an athletic freak. Nobody's calling Chaz Lanier an athletic freak, right? Meshack is, and he could be great, but you don't have enough Meshacks. If you had 4 Meshacks and Parr, you'd be shutting everybody down. You wouldn't score any offense, but you'd be shutting everybody down. So to me, it's like you're recruiting these tweeners. Like you don't know what you want to be. You're not recruiting enough athletic freaks to play elite defense like what Houston does. But again, I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. Go look at what Houston's done in the NCAA tournament the last handful of years, and look at how they get knocked out. Their elite defense runs into a team that can't miss, and then Houston never has enough offense to keep pace, and then they go home early. So that's why I've been saying for years, I think I'm about to say this on Friday night to you, Frank, which is we're top 5 or top 2 in defense 4 straight years, and we're sub 30 in offense. I would give up a top 5 offense or a top 5 defense right now for a top 10 offense and a 15th to 20th defense, because you have to have that. Like I would give it up right now, but he's all about the defense, and there's just not enough offense, and it's going to be a problem. And as I said earlier, you're going to run into a team in the NCAA tournament to where your defense isn't elite enough and it's not good enough, and you're not going to have guys that can make shots.
Yeah, Carrie, you want to piggyback on that one?
He said everything perfectly. I don't have anything follow up after that. That was all perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it hits the nail on the head with it. And I don't know what caused them to change their philosophy from the Grant Schofield team, which underachieved. They should have. I mean, I can sit here and say Lamonte Turner still hasn't fouled Carson Edwards to this day, but the fact of the matter is they couldn't close then. You kind of had a little bit of transition. You had that COVID year. They weren't making the tournament that year anyway, unless they won the SEC tournament. But then you come back with it, and you mentioned Keon Springer in it. I think there's too much focus on the defense. But, like you said, you got to be able to score points. You got to be able to score points. That's the bottom line. And, not many teams shoot the ball like Kentucky does against Tennessee, but that's 2 times this year Kentucky has absolutely smoked them on offense. And, even going back to March, the last regular season game last year, Kentucky could not miss in that game. And I know it's different coaching staff and stuff, but it's the same team that's out there. So, Carrie, I'll kick this one to you. So with the remaining games left on it, if you had, I don't know if you have a schedule pulled up or not right now, but what would be, does this change your thoughts on how this team could finish the season? Still about right in line with where it's at. What do you think? If you had to make a prediction right now, where do you say this team or how they finish the season?
I don't necessarily know if tonight changes the grand scheme of how Tennessee finishes the regular season, just because they do play Vanderbilt at home, they get to go to LSU, and they get to play South Carolina at home last game of the regular season. Those are all 3 wins, in my opinion. Vanderbilt would be the only one that could be tough. But then again, you play Vanderbilt at home, and Vanderbilt's not coming into Knoxville and winning. You play at Texas A&M, not this upcoming Saturday, but the next one. That one's scary. Texas A&M is pretty stinking good this year. We went there last year and struggled big time, so I'm gonna mark that one down as a loss. So it's at Texas A&M. I think you beat LSU that next Tuesday. You come back home, play Alabama at home. I can't say that Alabama's going to beat us. That's against my religion. So of course I do think that Tennessee will beat Alabama, and then go to Ole Miss. I think they'll drop that one. Come back home for the last game, beat South Carolina. So over the last 6 games, Tennessee goes 4-2. I'm more than happy with that. That puts Tennessee at 24-7 on the season. I'll take that any year. So overall, I'm not too worried about the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's
regular season at least.
Jordan, how do you think Tennessee does Alabama potential? And obviously, there's more games that are going to be. Texas A&M is going to be tough on the road. Ole Miss is going to be tough on the road. Do you think Alabama can pose some of the same problems Kentucky has?
It can, but what the weird thing to me in that situation is, for some reason, Rick Barnes has had Nate Oates' number. I don't know what it is. I mean, they pretty much, Alabama and Kentucky kind of play the same style of offense. Nate Oates is more of the NBA analytical, but for whatever reason, Barnes has had Nate Oates' number for 2 years now. I'll also say, it's wild. This statement for me is going to be wild. We have the number 1 Ken Palm defense on Ken Palm, but watching us play, I don't look like it's as good as it has been the last 2 or 3 years. You go look, and since SEC play, 3 or 4 of our worst defensive performances of the year have happened since SEC play began. And it's just wild for me to see the number 1 in defense, but it's not as good as it has been the past 2 to 3 seasons. This is Kentucky, one of the worst defenses in all of college basketball, and you scored 73 and 64. I mean, this is a team that gave up 90-something to Arkansas at Rupp, gave up 100 to Florida, gave up 100 to Alabama, and you scored 64 points up there. I mean, they're terrible on defense, and you couldn't do anything. But the last 6 games, I think you go 4-2, 3-3, somewhere in there. I agree with what Carrie said. I think, I don't going to A&M. When's the last time we've won there? Right? I mean, that's a tough place to play. It's been a while since we've won down there.
Got drilled last year there.
Yeah. And Ole Miss is going to be tough. That's a tough place to play. Their style too. So really 4-2, 3-3 is going to depend on the Alabama game. And, to what Carrie said, I don't want to say that we'll lose Alabama. We've had their number. It's at home. So you have all the advantages there. But if you play the way you have against Kentucky these 2 times, you will lose because they're going to shoot threes just like Kentucky did, and they're going to play you the same exact style. So 4-2, 3-3 down the stretch. The Alabama game is the swing game there, and that's still a good regular season. That's still a good season overall. You're still probably going to be a top 2 seed if you finish with that record. And then it's just going to come down to what draw you get in the NCAA tournament. So, I mean, we're pretty much going to be a top 10 team, top 15 team all season, and finish 23, 24, 25 regular season wins, somewhere in that range. So it's going to be a successful season, but just the most aggravating thing to me, just the overarching theme between these 2 Kentucky losses and what I think is going to happen in March is, again, what I've repeated over and over and over is I just think when it comes time to, get something done, your offense is going to fail you just like it has repeatedly over and over and over for the past 5 to 6 years outside of the Dalton Knecht year.
I've got an interesting question for both of you here, and I'm curious to see how you answer this. And I'll answer because I see a lot of, I see Kentucky fans in here too. They seem pretty happy with what Pope's doing. And I know they've had their struggles and stuff. And I'm not talking in history so far. I'm talking current time and future going forward. Whose ceiling is higher moving forward? Rick Barnes, Mark Pope. Carrie, I'm going to you first.
I mean, going forward.
And I'm not talking about just this year. I'm talking about like in terms of style of play, recruiting, ability to hit the portal. Who, based on their building, what they're doing, has the higher ceiling for future years?
I'd definitely say Mark Pope. I mean, younger guy. Rick Barnes, I don't know if 5 years is like the max of, if he gives us 5 more years, that's a miracle, in my opinion. So I think the easy answer there is Mark Pope. Mark Pope's adjusting to the game. Rick Barnes is kind of sticking with what he's always done, which I'm perfectly okay with. I love Rick Barnes. I'm still thankful we have him. I'm happy we're actually watching Tennessee basketball games and we're actually competitive and we're a top 15 team, because that's something I never experienced in my life until Rick Barnes stepped on campus. So, of course, I'm happy to have Rick Barnes. But if you look at team-wise, of course, I'm going to choose the way that Mark Pope puts together his teams.
Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Carrie said. I think moving forward, it's Mark Pope. Their NIL budget's much bigger than Tennessee's. They can go out and get players with their NIL budget. It's a lot easier to recruit to Kentucky than it is to recruit to Tennessee. He plays a more modern style of basketball, and he can go out and get shooters. And if you have shooters, that's going to elevate your floor on the offensive end. I still wonder, he's never won an NCAA tournament game, and his defense is what hurt him at BYU. And, I mean, outside of playing us, their defense still hasn't been very good this season. So, how good can their defense be? It doesn't have to be top 5 like ours, but, it needs to at least be respectable, and it's been sub 100 pretty much the entire season for them. So that's something that he's definitely going to have to work on and, elevate that a little bit, at least get him to be average. But moving forward, I do think it would be Mark Pope, just because of the resources that he has and the style of basketball that he plays. And then, like to what Carrie said, with like the Rick Barnes thing, I know I'm complaining a lot about what's going on with him, but he's the greatest basketball coach our university's ever had, the program's ever had. He's better than Bruce Pearl. He's accomplished more. He's done more. He'll probably go down as the second winningest coach of program history. The way he's built it, the way he's done it, everything about him is the best we've ever had. And I'm not saying that I want the man fired or I want him gone. It's none of that. It's just my aggravation comes from, I know after watching this for so long, we are hitting our head against the ceiling over and over and over and over. And this is what we are. Unless another Dalton Knecht walks through the door, this is what it's going to be year in and year out. You're going to have a very great regular season, a very fun regular season. You're going to win 22, 25 games, finish top 4 in the conference, may even win the conference in the regular season, be top 15 all year, and win ranked games. But when it comes time to do something in March and get to our first Final Four, he's going to come up short. And after seeing this year's new, it's kind of, for me, I know Carrie's much younger than I am, and Frank, you may relate to this. It's kind of like the Fulmer thing, right? Like, after a while, like, okay, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4. You get sick and tired of seeing the same thing over, and you want to get to the next level. And for me, my frustration is coming to where, okay, I've seen this movie before. Like, I've watched this movie 8 times now. I don't need to watch it again because I know the ending to this movie. And, I can fast forward and we know how this movie's probably very likely going to end, which is probably a Sweet 16 matchup where you shoot 2 for 19 from 3 and you score 63 points and the other team can't miss because we've seen the movie 8 times already.
Yeah, and I mean, I still have the memory of, last year was a pretty good year. And, we can, the Zach Edey thing, we can go on about that all day long. That it was going to take a lot for Tennessee to beat Purdue. That was a good Purdue basketball team. I still go back to the year before that, though. You had a perfectly paved path to the Final Four, and you had that night in Madison Square Garden against Florida Atlantic and went to the house. That was a tough one. That was a tough, especially after you had just dominated Duke in the previous round. And, some of you mentioned Bruce. I'll tell you what, if Bruce Pearl comes back to Knoxville, the House of Orange is done with basketball. That's my thoughts on Bruce Pearl. I know he's a good coach. I cannot stand the guy.
If Bruce Pearl's ever the head coach of Tennessee again, I'll eat a shoe on this stream because it's never going to happen.
Yeah, that is not going to happen. I've seen it. I'm pretty sure not only were bridges burned, I think they were absolutely blown up when he left. And, we can look back at that with Pearl all we want. Would it have been anything today? No. But it was then. That's all that matters. And he took the program that he built and he resurrected. I'll give him credit for that. He took it for granted, though. And I don't know how he has not gotten in trouble at Auburn. So, it's, the guy got canned. He got canned for a reason down there. It's not like he just left and took another job. He got fired on it. But
going real quick, going back to your FAU 2 years ago, that's another team that you ran into that played a modern style of basketball that had 4 guards that spread the floor and just shot it all over the place. And it's just basketball. Again, basketball's changed. It's evolved. And it's all about spacing, shooting, tempo, pushing pace, having guys that can create their own shot. And he seems to outside of the Alabama matchup, and that's just a unique one. He seems to be having trouble with those type of basketball teams that, pace, space, shooting, creating your shot off the dribble, creating one-on-one is just what he seems to have trouble with. And again, going back to the question that you asked me earlier, there's more teams that do that, so you have a higher percentage chance of running into another team like that once the NCAA tournament comes.
I got to hit this one here. The dude got a show cause. To me, you look at it now, it wasn't much. He got a show cause. He pretty much put the program on probation because the Conzo Martin era was probation. And then they lucked up. It took a petition to wake them up and get them to the Sweet 16.
What he did initially to get in trouble was nothing. The barbecue thing was stupid. All right, Aaron Kraft been at the house, that was stupid. Okay, that would have been a slap on the wrist. Calling Aaron Kraft's parents and asking them to lie to NCAA investigators for yourself and having your assistants lie in there for yourself to save yourself and throw them under the bus, that's why he's burnt bridges. That's why he got in trouble, and that's why he's no longer here. And then when the own university put recruiting restrictions on him and told him he can't do something, he then turned around and went out and did the one thing they told him he couldn't do. That's just a slap in the face of the university that was trying to back you. So he did it to himself. He shot his own self in the foot. It was him. It was nobody did it to himself but himself.
What was it he did? I know what you're talking. I can't remember what the violation was because, like I said, it's like he was not gone, and then
it was. So basically, it's called the bump rule, which is back then what would happen is you're not allowed to have contact with recruits between certain periods of the year. but you could, in those periods of the year happen to be during like tournament games, like high school tournament games or AAU games and so forth and so on. You could go watch them play, but you couldn't talk to them or mingle with them or anything like that. And they would get around it by having an assistant coach or a family member pull the kid over there in close proximity to each other and, mingle. And he was told specifically, you can't break another rule. You can't do anything at all to get us in trouble at all whatsoever. And then like a week later, he went to a tournament and did the whole bump rule thing, and he got turned in for it, and they canned him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he made his own bed with it. I mean, that whole era to me, the Conzo Martin and the Donnie, I think Donnie Tyndall would have actually been a decent coach down there, but Donnie Tyndall was a slime ball too. And he made it 1 year and he was gone. Of course, it wasn't for anything he did at Tennessee. It's from Southern Miss, but still, we lucked into Barnes on that one. It was really the perfect storm that happened. Got Barnes, and I don't know how Barnes goes. I mean, a lot of people say, you and I've talked about it too. Does he go with Ziegler after this year? And you got to wonder, because based on what's coming back, I mean, you've got Boswell looks like the prototypical Rick Barnes recruit to me. Might have a good shooting game. Most of the nights he's not going to. I don't know what Estrella's game is. Supposedly Estrella could shoot outside coming in. I don't know that he ever does that in this system. Cade Phillips won't take a shot outside of 3 foot. Parra can't shoot outside. You've got who am I forgetting that's coming back, not counting the recruits. Obviously Cam Carr hit the road.
I think that's it.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm trying to think.
You're counting the walk-on guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's either playing 9 scholarship guys, so we know Ziegler is gone, Chaz Lanier is gone, Mashak's gone, Milicic is gone, Dubar is gone. That's leaving you 4 players right there.
That's why I think, and this is just speculation, I don't know anything at all whatsoever, but that's why I think this is it. That's why I think he's done. You look at what he has to do to build a roster, and then I really wonder, having to bring that many pieces into the program, how successful will it actually be? I think with Zakai walking out the door, and you guys probably saw on Twitter a week or so ago where he said that if Zakai wasn't here, he's not sure if he'd be doing this any longer. I think at the end of the year, when the season's over with and he sees he doesn't have Zakai, he doesn't have Mashak, and he looks at what he has to do to rebuild this roster, I think he's going to be like, I just don't have it anymore to be able to do that. Because, I mean, I think he's the type of coach right now to say, if he's not going to win games at a high level, he'd rather just be at home with his grandkids. And I think if you look at the roster next season, I'm not sure how good we're actually going to be with what you got to replace and what you got to bring in. So I think you could be seeing the last month and a half of Rick Barnes at Tennessee. And that's complete speculation on my part.
I mean, I look at now, so you've got the 4 guys we just mentioned. You got Amari Evans coming in, consensus 4-star. I've seen the comparison there of another Jemai Mashak, maybe a little better offensively. And then you've got, and you probably know a little bit more about this guy, not Dwayne Brown. He seems like a fairly athletic center, but, a guy at that size, what's his game like based on what you've seen?
Just more of the old school big guy that bangs in the paint and posts up and, really does all of his work inside the paint area. I've not really heard or seen anything of him being any kind of stretch 5 or stretch 4 or, having any kind of handles or anything like that. He's just a really big post with a big body that bangs in the paint. Basically, I mean, kind of like an Awaka, like a bigger Awaka that just does all of his work around the rim. And again, modern basketball, I mean, it's just not what it is anymore. It's just you don't see that. I mean, look at Kentucky last night. Look at where Kentucky puts their centers. How many times did you see their center post up for anything?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Not much, and their centers can shoot outside too.
I mean, it's just
the thing of it too.
And it's a lot of it's because these kids grow up and they look in the NBA, and you see the 7-footers in the NBA, they're shooting threes, and they're all outside the arc. And there's you don't have a Dikembe Mutombo and a Akeem Olajuwon and a Shaquille. They're like those are dinosaurs that you'll never like. That's done and over with. And our centers, like Barnes don't let them shoot threes. He don't let them step outside and shoot the ball. And he makes them play a post type game. And you get a guy like Opara, and his post game isn't that great, but he's not really skilled offensively, just all dunks and layups. And you got to be skilled in today's NBA or today's college game, just today's basketball. You got to be skilled. And, I just worry about how, you're losing Meshack and Zakai, and that's your culture. Those guys are that's your culture. And I worry about moving forward after this season.
Carrie, if Barnes were to come back, how does he reshape the roster next year that we don't just wash, rinse, repeat every year? Based on what we talked about is coming back, plus the 2 freshmen, how would you fill out the rest of the roster after that?
Just get as many transfer portal guys as you possibly can. There's no excuse for him not to fill out the roster anymore. He should have learned his lesson this season, because it's bit us in the rear end because of what he's done, what he's chosen to do. With guys have to fit my culture, they have to fit my team, they have to fit my scheme and everything. I don't care. Like, you got to have enough roster guys of when injuries happen, like they happen to Kentucky and they happen to us. If we're in Kentucky's position right now, we're screwed. There's walk-ons getting significant minutes right now for us. So it's like, just bring in guys. I could care less if they fit in their system. They may end up like Dubar right now and sitting on the bench and not giving any production. And that's okay if that happens. Just build a roster. I don't care. I don't care if he fits. If he can score, give him a chance. If he shits the bed, treat him like Dubar. Sit him on the bench. It's what it is. Like, I'm just sick and tired of, we got 9 scholarship guys. It's just not good enough. So
is there specific, do you guys, and Carrie, I'll go to you first, and then Jordan, is Barnes just not been putting enough emphasis on high school guys, or is he recruiting the wrong type guy recently? Because I don't know, it seems to me like his high school recruiting is in the tank now. Is that a shift in philosophy from just due to the portal, or what is that? Carrie, what's your thoughts on that first?
He just doesn't recruit that many high school guys, it seems like now. He brought in he's bringing in 2 guys next year, 3, 4, maybe. And he'll get forced to add another guy or 2 because of the roster if he does come back next season. So that'll be a good sign at least. But this past season, they're just not bringing in enough guys and not enough good basketball players. From what we've saw this season from Bishop Boswell, there's been nothing. I don't think he scored a point in SEC play.
No.
It's just not – I've not seen many promising things with scorers coming out of high school from him. They can play defense all they want to, but he can't recruit a guy out of high school that could score, it seems like, anymore.
Yeah. Jordan, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think number one, from the guys that I've seen or read or heard about them recruiting, they shot for the moon. Like Nate Amon's a top 5 player. The Burris kid's a top 10 player. There's a couple other guys that were top 20 players. They went all in on. They were never going to get them because they're never going to offer them the money that they want. And that's, that's the thing with Barnes too in today's climate. And he does what he does, which is he's not going to pay an 18-year-old high school recruit a couple of $1 million and pay them more than what kids and players on his current roster make without earning a single penny of it. And teams like Duke and Louisville and Kentucky and those type of schools, they don't care to go pay a top 5 player $2 million or whatever it takes to go get a legitimate Cooper Flagg type player. They don't care. And Rutgers paying an Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper a couple of million apiece to go there. They don't care. Barnes is not going to do that. So number one, that cuts you out of the top echelon talent from the very beginning because you're not going to get those guys because you're not going to pay their asking price. And then 2, he has a specific type of player. As Carrie was talking about, they have to fit certain things, culture, just background, type, the way they play. And he has a specific type, and we see what that specific type is. It's the Bishop Boswells, it's the Jemiah Meshacks, right? It's the Amari Evans that are coming in that you're talking about that's compared to a Jamal Meshack. So he's looking like he's would rather do the portal and rather go get, experienced guys that aren't going to cost a lot of money than he would waste his time on 17, 18-year-old kids that are going to cost a lot of money.
I guess if you were recruiting, would you go with, say, a Boswell, 4-star, more of an athlete, it looks like to me, can play a little bit of defense? Or do you go get a guy like Kentucky with Perry or Noah? Guys that are freshmen, we see what their skill set is. Which would you rather have, a Boswell or a Perry or a Noah?
Perry and Noah.
Yeah. I just thought about this. Would Rick Barnes recruit a Chris Lofton?
No, because he can't play defense.
There you go.
And that's
one of the best
problem.
Evaluators of talent that's come through Knoxville was probably Buzz Peterson. Buzz just couldn't coach a lick. I mean, because you saw what Bruce Pearl inherited, and it looked like nothing. All of a sudden, you've got to walk on Juwan Smith, who pretty dang good ball player. Chris Lofton, pretty good ball player. C.J. Watson, probably one of the more underrated point guards in Tennessee basketball history. I mean, there were solid actual basketball players recruited by Buzz Peterson. Pearl recruited pretty well. I think Pearl was getting in more of the athletes. Konzo and Barnes have really kind of same philosophies, I think. They want more of those 4-year guys who are playing defense, inconsistent on offense. Barnes just a lot better coach than Konzo. I think Barnes definitely recruits better, but why is Barnes, at this point, why would he go pay all that money for a big high school recruit just to sit him on the bench when you go get a few guys out of the portal? Why is his high school recruits not panned out in Knoxville? They've about all transferred the last few years.
The expectations and just the way he coaches. He wants them to be perfect on every single. See, that was what I compared to for the longest time. Now, this isn't going to be a good comparison now because Calipari's fallen off a cliff the past couple of years. But for a while, I kept saying I would rather go the Calipari path, where you recruit a bunch of young studs, you throw them on the floor in November, December, let them get their teeth kicked in, because in February and March they're going to be really, really good and have taken their stripes and they're going to know how to play. Whereas Barnes, like a few years ago with the Brandon Huntley-Hatfield thing, you didn't play him in November, you didn't play him in December, and you didn't play him in January. And then a bunch of your players got hurt. Olivier Kamwa got hurt, a couple guys missed. And then guess what you had to do out of necessity? You had to throw a freshman in there with no experience, and he got 8 and alive. But if you'd have put him in November and December and January and you'd got him some experience, he would have had time in and experience in to where he would have been ready to play in November or March. Like, that's my biggest thing is he puts these guys on the bench. He doesn't give them playing time. He doesn't throw them out there in blowouts. And they don't get enough minutes. And then come February and March, when it's the end of the season and guys are getting hurt or guys are tired, then you throw them out there and you expect them to be perfect. But you didn't teach them anything in November and December. But that's why I've always liked the Calipari approach when he first got to Kentucky. Play those guys, let them go through their scars, and they're going to go on a deep run of March because they've gained their experience over a 3 to 4 month period.
Well, case in point, Carrie will probably get a laugh out of this when he's heard me say it a lot. Last year against Purdue, you're all SEC center sitting over on the bench with a towel over his head. And then you got to press JP Estrella into action. And going back to your point, where was he at earlier in the season? Very little. But then all of a sudden you're putting him out there against Zach Edey. Come on. We can go down the line of Brandon Huntley-Hatfield. Whatever happened with Julian Phillips that year, it seemed like he was a main guy. And then down the stretch, he's not even playing. Kennedy Chandler, he played tough with him. Kennedy Chandler was the man at the end of that year. Wish he would have stayed a couple more years. But, Carrie, I go to you. What's the point then of going and paying all this money for a high school guy when you go to the portal at this point? Does it even make sense for Barnes to go after one of those big-time guys?
I think it does make sense if he's willing to change his philosophy. bring one in and just let the kid grow in the system and give him all the chances that he needs, and let the kid struggle from the first few months of the season and then hopefully turn into something. Because I mean, if he's going to stick around, he's got to at least try something different. Because it's working, but it's also not working at the same time. And there's no depth. Like we don't have any depth going into the next season. You don't have anybody that could probably go out and score a point if you needed to right now with next year's roster. So it's just, I think you do have to fork up a little bit of cash and just give the guy a chance, because he's done the opposite of that and paid the guys and let him ride the bench. And they hit the portal, and then you wasted the money on them. And then they're probably going to go somewhere, see a lot more playing time, may actually turn into something. We haven't seen that really happen, but that could happen with De Leon. Cam Carr may actually turn into something, because I thought he'd been great here, but he quit on the team. So I don't know what's wrong with him mentally, but Barnes has to do something, in my opinion. Yeah, somebody's going to go somewhere else and flourish, and it's going to hurt really bad because we paid them probably more than guys on the team were already making to come here, and then they go and do something somewhere else when they should have been doing it here if Rick Barnes just would have gave him a chance.
Now, on that too, Jordan, I'll kick it to you. You mentioned earlier talking about Barnes ain't going to pay the money to a high school guy to come in. Is he willing to pay that real big money to the top portal guys? I mean, you look at who he's gotten, but I know Knecht was rated fairly high. Chaz was, I guess Chaz was up a little bit more, but do you think he's willing to maybe pay one portal guy and then build around, or do you think he is willing to pay multiple portal guys to get it done?
To go get like the big name portal guys, I don't think he's going to pay, $1.5, $2, $3 million to go get one big time portal entry. But to take $2.5 million and spread over 2-3 names, he'll do that. Chaz got paid pretty well last season or this season to come here, but it wasn't nowhere near what some of the other top portal guys were getting. Chaz actually, to his credit, took less money to come to Tennessee because he wanted to be at Tennessee. Mm-hmm. You look at it this way. There's a 5-star recruit Tennessee's been trying to get for a while. And the rumor out there is the kid's asking for $2 million to sign. That's over pretty much half of Tennessee's budget for this roster this season. So
what is their budget? Is it around 4?
Around 2.7, 2.8.
Oh, for the whole roster?
For the whole roster.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So are you going to pay one 18-year-old kid $2 million and your whole roster is getting paid 2.7? Or look at it this way. You pay one kid $2 million, or you go get 4 portal guys that add up to be $2 million. Right? So, would you rather have Gainey, Milicic, Akpar, and Chaz for $2 million, or would you rather have the one 18-year-old kid that may or may not play or may not be good?
Who's going to be more consistent?
So you probably want to, take your shot with the Igors and Chaz and Gainies and Akpars and pay them a little bit less. So it's just the way the world is in college athletics now. It's the money, it's the agents, it's driving up the price of everything. So it's a decision you got to make. It's why a lot of these older coaches have decided to get out of the game, which is why I'm still shocked that Barnes is still in here trying to play it. But we'll see how much longer it goes.
Yeah, I mean, he's handled it well, I think, with the portal and stuff. I think he's done really well with the portal. I just think his style, it is what it is. I mean, I still think he's evolved some, but, I just don't think you're going to get him to be a total offensive juggernaut by any means down the line. I see a lot of people saying this, and we're about 1 hour and 5 in. We'll get into wrapping this thing up. A lot of people are saying it on it. I don't know that I agree, but is Chaz a bust? Carrie, do you think Chaz Lanier is a bust?
No, I don't. I wouldn't say he's a bust until I see. I would mark him a bust or not after the last game of the season, because I don't want to say something and it be totally wrong. I'm optimistic. I hate bashing on people like that. So I'd have to see it to believe it, like at the end of the season, and be like, okay, he was actually a bust. And even then, I probably wouldn't come out and say it unless it's on a live stream or something.
Jordan, what's your thoughts on it?
No, he's not a bust. I mean, he's averaging 15, 16 points per game in SEC play, still shooting close to 38, 39%. I mean, he's not a bust. Is he as good as I thought he was going to be? No. I thought he'd be, a touch better than this. I thought he'd be able to get to the rim and finish better than what he's doing here. I thought he might be a little bit more dynamic of a scorer, creating stuff for himself one-on-one than what he's shown. I didn't expect him to be Dalton Knecht. I didn't expect him to be that good, but I expected him to be a little bit better creating his own shot. I thought he'd be a little bit more athletic, but he's not a bust. I mean, to me, a bust would have been coming in here and you're averaging 6 a game, 8 a game, and you're shooting low 30% from three, and you're scoring 4 or 5 a night, here and there, and you may score 12, and that to me that would have been a bust. But
So kind of
still
like Dubar.
consistently scoring. Yeah, like a Dubar. I mean, you look at Chaz's stats last year and Dubar's stats last year at their previous – they're pretty much equal, to Carrie's point. And then you look at what Dubar is doing, you look at what Chaz is doing. Dubar's the bust, if we want to be frank about it. Chaz isn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I Chaz in the bust. All right, I think people had it in mind he was going to be Dalton Knecht again. People set it up. He's going to pick right up where Dalton Knecht. Now, there are those instances like tonight he drives in and dunks on Kentucky guy. And I don't know how that wasn't a foul, too. And Barnes, I've seen Barnes chirping at the ref on it, too. But he has those moments where you're like, yeah, this dude can do that. But it seems like he's dead set on the jump shot and stuff. And I think you hit it earlier, Jordan, talk about, or both of you might have said it, teams rough him up, and he does not play well getting roughed up. I think that's been proven multiple times now. I mean, he can still get you 10 points like tonight, but it's not a real effective 10 points, especially when you go over from 3-point range. I don't know. I'm of the – I don't even – I mean, unless he just disappears the rest of the way, he's not a bust. Is he what everybody hyped him up to be? Maybe not, but – the beautiful thing about it is the season's not over either. And, it's a lot. I mean, two years ago, even though the season ended against FAU, Zakai Ziegler went out with the injury and everybody said the season was done. They made the Sweet 16. They dominated Duke, which was a kind of if you look back on it now, the way Tennessee plays gave Duke a lot of trouble because they were a lot more physical. But I still think the team has a lot of potential. I still think there's a high ceiling here. I mean, we've seen it for a few games. To me, I don't know. You guys feel free to disagree with me on it. Kentucky is just a matchup problem for them. I mean, is that what you guys think? Or
I'm going to say probably the most obvious statement that anybody can say is this team misses Dalton Knecht. And what I mean by that is you go look at the Kentucky game that was played here. You look at this Kentucky game. You go look at the Vanderbilt game at Memorial Gym that we lost. Last season, how many times were we in those exact same spots with 3 or 4 minutes to go? And then basically it was give DK the ball and get out of the way. Yeah. And then he would go on an 8-0 run or a 10-0 run, and you look up and you're up by 2, you're up by 3, and you go on to win the game. You're missing a guy, a Dalton Knecht or another guy, to where in a situation tonight when it was 60-58 and you were ahead and you had the ball, you went 4 corners and gave him the ball at the top of the key and said, go score, take us home.
Those were awesome, man.
So, I mean, the Georgia game last year comes to my mind, the Vanderbilt game, the Auburn game. There were so many instances last year where you did that, where you had to have a bucket to seal the game, or you had to have a bucket to stay in a game, or whatever, and you just gave him the ball and everybody got out of the way and he went and scored. You don't have that on this team, and that's what this team is missing to take it. That's what this team is missing to be at the next level from where they're at.
Yeah, I think they're more in line with what the teams the previous 2 to 3 years prior to Dalton Knecht were. Now they're kind of back in that mold because like I said, how many times we see it last year, even with Ziegler on the court, the ball got thrown into Dalton Knecht, and it's just get out of the way. Just get out of the way and let DK cook. And I didn't expect Chaz to be him. I thought Chaz might have a little bit of that in him, though. And I think we saw earlier in the year he's just streaky, man. He's a streaky shooter is what he is. But we'll see, man. I still think this team's got a lot of potential down the stretch. I would like to see, man, right now, the way they're playing, I'd like to see Milicic be a little more aggressive. Well, I thought he turned down some shots tonight with him shooting good. We'll see, but we'll get into getting out here. Carrie, final thoughts on the night, final thoughts moving forward with this team on what's kind of a piss. I guess I could say one thing when we said it earlier. There was a point in time where it didn't really faze people to lose to Kentucky because you were used to it. Now the fact that we're pissed off about it's a pretty good sign of a changing of the times. And I've seen some say, well, Kentucky owns us. Kentucky's won 3 in a row. I mean, I guess you could say this year they have, but we'll see where both teams go down the stretch. But Carrie, final thoughts on this one?
I would just say embrace the suck of tonight and then wake up tomorrow morning and move on. If this was March and this would have happened, yeah, I would be a whole lot more mad. I was really mad when they beat us in Knoxville. Not that mad tonight. Still ticked off, but I mean, that's college basketball. But you just got a lot of season left, it seems like. You still got 6 games. Tennessee goes 6-0 in the next 6 games and pulls out a miracle. Who cares about this game tonight? Like, nobody even thinks about it, really. So just try to find a way to move on. I don't know, just if you're a fan, keep your head off of things. Don't really think about the team. That's what I typically do. I probably won't even think about basketball for the next 3 days, but that's just me personally. Shift until Hofstra on Friday night and Tony Vitello. He'll take us to the glory land. He'll get a nice, easy sweep, and we'll all be happy this weekend. So overall, look forward to that. Beat Vandy and just keep on going forward.
To one of your points, I think I'm a lot more pissed tonight over the loss than I was the one in Knoxville. Because on that night, I don't know, I felt that one was just, what do you do on that night with all they were hitting? And we took 45 freaking shots from 3-point. I don't know, tonight I thought I'm a bit more upset over tonight. But Jordan, what's your final thoughts on it tonight?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm a little bit more upset about this one than I was the one in Knoxville because I felt like at the time when we lost the one in Knoxville, I was ticked off. But then the next day I got to thinking about it, I'm like, we let Auburn beat us twice. Our legs were tired from the Auburn game on that Saturday night, which is why we shot so many threes. So, I kind of talked myself and I said, okay, this is why this happened. But tonight I'm more ticked off about this one just because you overcoached and you overcorrected. You went from shooting 45 threes and I guarantee you he pounded it into their head. We're not shooting 45 threes again. So then you turn that into 12 or 13 mid-range jump shots. Like that's overcorrection. But moving forward, like Carrie said, go beat Vanderbilt. You'll be 21-5. You get a week off because you don't play in the middle of the week next week before you play Texas A&M. Maybe that helps you going down there, and maybe you can steal one down there and go 4-2 or go 5-1 down the stretch and finish off the season pretty well and, get into the SEC tournament and see how it plays out. But for me personally, I hate Kentucky and I have family that live in Kentucky. So anytime they beat us, I never hear the end of it. So my phone's currently blowing up for them, trash talking me. So it sucks. I hate losing to them in absolutely anything. And, there for the longest time, we had the bragging rights because Barnes owned Calipari and he owned Kentucky, but they've won 3 in a row. It absolutely sucks.
Yeah, I agree. It's at this point, it is what it is. It's hopefully we'll look back at this one later on, just be like just a bump in the road. But there seems to be a formula. I mean, you look at Tennessee's loss. I mean, Auburn. I'm still kind of puzzled at how Tennessee held Auburn down 53 points, but yet Kentucky lights them up too. I don't know. I guess just styles of play like we've discussed for the whole time, but we're going to get out of here on that one. Just a rough night. Man, we've had a good crowd in here. We've been hovering around 450, 400 tonight. That's a really good crowd tonight. So thank you guys for getting on with me tonight. Appreciate all of you tuning in tonight as well. If you're a first-time viewer, if you're normal and you have not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Less than 100 subs to 3,000. Be pretty cool to hit that soon. We've kind of hit a little bit of a lull here, but hopefully we'll pick back up on it. Hit that like, that share as well. Appreciate you guys tuning in. He's Carrie. He's Jordan. This is Frank. This is the House of Orange. You guys have a great rest of your evening. And you know what? It doesn't matter. Even win or lose, it's still a better night to wear the orange than it is the blue.